Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. This is Michael Okun. We are broadcasting live from the Norman Fixell Institute at the great University of Florida campus. We're coming to you live here as an event with the Tourette Association of America, which is one of the premier groups that brings education free to people all over the planet. And so we're here today to talk to you about Tourette syndrome, about COVID 19, and about the vaccines. We've been really interested in all of the questions that have come into the foundation, and it's just super important that we clearly communicate to you, to the public, to people that you know that have tics and have Tourette about COVID 19, about the vaccine, and about all of the things that may be impacting people's quality of life. And so I just want to give a shout out to Amanda Talty and to Megan Burns, who run the programs at the Tourette Association of America. These are really just awesome people, and they've set up just a really terrific organization to give you information and to make sure that you're prepared not only for COVID, but if you have questions about Tourette. We do have social media handles that are through the foundation, which is a non for profit. So the Facebook handle is at Tourette Association. The Instagram handle is at Tourette Association. The Twitter handle is at Tourette ASSN, at Tourette ASSN, and we'll put this into the chat for you, and it's up on our website. So if you Google or whatever web browser you use, if you type in Tourette Association of America, you'll be able to get that. We have full-time information that's available and a referral team to answer any of the questions that you may have. These are at support@tourette.org. So if you want to email support, the word support, SUPPORT, at Tourette.org, or you can visit our website. It's really easy, Tourette.org. Or if you're old school like me, just pick up the phone and dial 888, the number 4 Tourette, Tourette, 888-4 Tourette, and we'll get you the information that you need. So without any further delay, we're going to spend a bunch of time here today talking about Tourette and about COVID-19. I'll be your host today. My name again is Michael Okun. I am a neurologist. I chair the Department of Neurology here at the University of Florida. I'm also on the medical advisory board for the Tourette Association of America. I used to chair that board, and it's a great group of people. And I'm the executive director for the Norman Fixell Institute for Neurological Diseases and home to one of the Tourette Centers of Excellence. And there are many all over the United States and many centers that we collaborate with all over the world. So we're going to discuss COVID-19 vaccines, we're going to explore the impact, and we're going to try to address myths that people may have surrounding the vaccines and examine the future of what might be the new normal. So there are also live comments. You can comment and put your comments in, and Megan Burns and I will make sure we go through the comments, and if we don't get to your questions and answers here online, then we certainly will try to get back with you, and feel free to reach out through all of our support through the website. So let's talk Tourette, let's talk COVID-19, let's talk vaccine. So here are your questions, and we've culled many of them, but feel free to write us some more here within our moderations and our comment section. And so first of all, the question that comes in was, can we receive the vaccine? And when we get the vaccine with Tourette, will it worsen our tics in any way? So the answer to the first part of the question is yes. You can receive the vaccine with Tourette syndrome and with tics. We do believe we have enough data now that we can, estimate that it is safe to be able to receive a vaccine. And so that is super important for people to know. Now, at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't really know. We didn't have cuts of data for different diseases like Tourette and like Parkinson and others, and Alzheimer's disease. And so we worried. People have these neurological dysfunctions. Should we rush in? Will the vaccines worsen things? In general, we have the general answer to that question. The answer to that question is it seems to be safe, and overall long term, meaning if we take all the data and we could sort of start pushing it together, we don't believe that the vaccines are going to make the ticks long term worse in any way. So thank you for that question. We have another question that's come in, and this is a question about wanting to wait. And this person says, I really want to wait before I decide whether or not to vaccinate my daughter, who was just diagnosed with a sudden onset of severe motor and verbal complex tics. And so the question is, in my heart, I want to wait. And so first of all, let me just tell you, I think it's super important that we respect everybody's viewpoints, okay? No matter how you feel about the vaccine, we all have to be respectful of each other. So I respect you whether you choose to get the vaccine or not, okay? So we have to start at that basic level of understanding. Now, when we move to saying, hey, I'm concerned because this is my kid, I don't want to expose my kid to something that's going to increase their risk of something. I get that. I have 2 kids myself. And so what I want to know is, what's the data telling us? Should I wait? And that's what the question is. Or should I move forward, okay, and go ahead and get a vaccination, particularly for someone who was just diagnosed with severe both motor and vocal, so making vocalizations or sounds and tics. The data would suggest that even in the newly diagnosed persons with Tourette, that the vaccine is safe, okay? In the United States, it's been cleared, the Pfizer vaccine's been cleared for age 12 and up, and there's some applications and looking at some of the other vaccines coming as well along the road here. And so we have all of that information up on the CDC website, and so we're beginning to see that, and that age may work its way down, but right now we're sitting at around 12. So my first answer would be, depending on the age, I would follow the FDA's guidance and the CDC's guidance on it, which is sitting at 12. That may decrease, and then depending on whether or not they have other abnormalities. What do I mean by other abnormalities? Well, I mean maybe they have a history of cancer. Maybe there's a history of some immune disease besides Tourette, okay, that's suppressing the immune system, and maybe you're worried that they might be at higher risk for COVID. When you talk with your doc, sometimes exceptions can be made to get people that are at very high risk, even below those age limits. It's a discussion that that would have to occur in those situations. But in most cases, it's 12 and up. And the data now, which we didn't have before, suggests that even in the early, and that was the question, even in the early folks that are getting COVID-19 and have early, they've just been diagnosed, okay, with Tourette syndrome. Even early on, if they can be vaccinated before they get COVID, they're going to be in much better shape. So even those early diagnoses of Tourette, we want to stress that those people are also eligible to get the vaccine, and we are in general recommending it. Although, again, we respect everybody's point of view and want to listen to everybody, and we understand the concern, especially in children. And, I want to keep my kids safe. You want to keep your kids safe. So the next question is about exacerbation or worsening of TS, of Tourette syndrome or tics with any of the vaccines. And so here's the straight truth. I've been studying these circuits in the brain, as is many people on our scientific advisory board for Tourette and medical advisory board for years, okay? These circuits in the brain, we give them a big name, and the name that we call them is the basal ganglia, okay? And these circuits in the brain, they are affected by stress, anxiety, sleep deprivation. Okay, stress, anxiety, sleep deprivation can really make them worse, okay? And medical procedures, any medical procedure, even drawing blood, even the needle going in the arm to draw blood, can worsen Tourette syndrome and tics, okay? And so it is totally possible, okay? It is possible, and not only is it possible, it's probable that a number of folks who take the vaccine with Tourette are going to have some worsening of their tics, particularly around the time that they get the vaccine. But what we've been seeing in our practices is even the worry. People are worried about whether or not to get the vaccine. That's also driving the tics up in folks. And so it definitely can lead to exacerbation, but this is called indirect. We don't have scientific evidence that it directly is making the tics worse. Where we do think is going on, and this is the best of the minds of the Scientific Advisory Board, the Medical Advisory Board, the experts that we've spoken to, the best minds, and sometimes we're wrong, we have to be humbling, but the best minds among us are telling me that they believe that the worsening is due mostly to the stress, anxiety, sleep deprivation, the procedure itself driving out the tics, but not the actual vaccine or anything that's in any of the vaccines. And I think that's important to know. We now have some data, okay, so we have cuts of data that tell us that this is probably true, that the experts are probably right on this point. But anybody who's worried about their kids, I totally get it. So thank you for that question. And I also want to remind everyone that we have in the chat box, okay, you can put comments in there. We are posting here. Megan Burns is helping us, and we are posting information about Tourette, about the COVID-19, where you can get information online, where you can get information on our websites. And also, we are put some information up about different ride-sharing services that can help to get you back and forth to vaccine appointments if you believe that that is the right choice for you or for your families. So the next question is there a recommendation on youth, I love that word, youth, receiving the vaccine? So let's define the word youth here. We now have a recommendation that people that are 12 years in age and up are cleared to get the vaccine, okay? And so, of course, you'll need to go and make sure you get the right one from the practitioner. The Pfizer was the first to get that recommendation. Those ages can change over time, and so we definitely tell you to reconsult our website at Tourette Association of America and also the CDC website to watch that. But right now, the recommendation for the question, age 12, 1-2, okay? The next question is any new trials for young children? Any new trials for young children, especially those impacted by Tourette syndrome or other tic disorders? Great question. So do you know where you go to check out trials? There's a great website that's run by the government, clinicaltrials.gov. It's a registration, and you get a clinical trials number associated with every trial, and every investigator that is credible will usually put that number in the research paper when they write the study. And so if you're actually ever looking for trials, whether they have anything to do with COVID-19 or Tourette, you can go in there and type the word Tourette or type any of the search words and see what's out there right now. I haven't personally, and I was looking this morning to see if there was anything. I haven't seen anything interesting yet pop up for vaccines within Tourette. But certainly watch that website. It may come up. There can be changes. It can change by the minute. I had a patient that I saw from Davenport, Iowa, and I'm in Florida, who was checking a website every single day. And then when they saw one of the trials we were doing for something come up, they were ready. They were ready to jump right on and call the same day that it got listed. So some people will check on that just like they check their Twitter or their social media feed. And so clinicaltrials.gov would be where you would see any new trials that were posted. Next question, should we plan on being monitored longer after receiving the shot? In general, we didn't know for sure when things rolled out. there were thousands, tens of thousands of people that were in the original trials that led to the approvals of the different vaccines. So that helped us to give us information about monitoring. And now we've had a tremendous experience both here at the University of Florida and all of my colleagues all over the country, whether they're in academic practice or whether they're in private practice or with hospitals or with health systems or with local outreach that's giving the vaccine. We now know that there are many people who get no reaction to the vaccine. The most common thing that we see is a sore arm, okay, where they put the vaccine in. But there are a number of people who may get nausea, who may feel hot or sweaty or get a little febrile and feel a little sick, usually no longer than a day or two after the vaccine. So should you be monitored? Well, I think you should be educated. I don't know that necessarily you need a monitoring plan, and be ready. So if you're febrile, if you're feeling hot and sweaty, that may mean that you have a fever. You may need to take some Tylenol or take some of what we call a non-steroidal drug if that's safe with your medical condition. If you have anything like kidney disease, you may need to consult with your doctor about what's allowed to be taken over the counter. Bring that fever down. It'll usually go away. You might feel some fatigue, after, but it's usually gone within a day or two. And so what I tell folks is when you put both feet in, and remember, we're not here today to tell you to get a vaccine, okay? We know this is a very personal choice. We're here to just answer questions and give you information. We respect your points of view on this. But if you decide you're going to put both feet in, or one arm in, as the pun may go, and go ahead and get a vaccine, then do it in a time where over the next day and a half, maybe you're not at work, maybe you're not needing to do something important, like go on a Facebook Live from the University of Florida where you're sweaty and not feeling good. But it seems that the majority of the people, okay, that are getting the vaccine, okay, are tolerating it with mostly just a sore arm or very mild side effects. Although there are a group that do need to have a day or two to just recover, who feel a bit under the weather. And that's just the straight truth about it. So if anybody tells you anything else, that there's no side effects or anything, well, that's true in a lot of people, but not in all people. So Michael Brown writes in here a live question for us about aspirin or ibuprofen reducing the actual effectiveness of the vaccine. We've seen several studies of people beginning to look at this problem, no large-scale study. There is a concern that if you take too much too early, it could knock down the immune system's response, because remember, aspirin or ibuprofen can slow that immune response, and you want the immune response. So if you're actually getting sick and you're getting side effects, that's a good thing. That's telling you the immune system is really revving up. You want it to make those antibodies against the COVID-19 vaccine, and so it's super important. We actually are beginning to believe over time, and remember early on in the pandemic there was all this stuff that ibuprofen was killing people, and that turned out to be not true. And so we have to be careful when we see these things in the news. We debunked that on a Facebook Live as well. And when we look at aspirin and ibuprofen, it probably does not reduce the efficacy of the vaccine. Most people are using it only if they need it, okay? But in general, what we're telling people is if you're getting sick after the vaccine, it's okay to bring down that sweating and that fever with either aspirin or ibuprofen, as long as it's okay with your doc and it's not going to affect your kidneys, or you have other diseases that are in the background that are not Tourette related that could make that worse. So it's a great question, Michael. But right now, we don't have a lot of data to suggest that that's a problem in my own population, and this is just my own opinion. I haven't been restricting it in the folks that are getting it in our population. So if you do need to take it because you're feeling bad, it's okay, at least in my view, to take it. Now, in terms of more questions that are coming in, there's a question about how you get information on how to get a vaccine, and we've got that up for you in the chat. It's www.vaccine.gov, and this is will take you to the latest recommendations, but also how to get to the vaccine. And Megan Burns has posted for you from the Tourette Association of America how you can get some free ride shares. Okay, so if you need a ride to get to it, and she's got the link right in there to vaccines.gov. So thanks to Megan for putting that up for everybody. Super great piece of information. The next question is it safe for people to get the vaccine if they have TS or they have another tick disorder? And the information that we have on this now is yes. If we look at the groups of folks that are getting it, we do believe now we have enough data to see that that the Tourette groups are not having any specific problem. They're not sticking out from the others, and so that's a good thing. Of course, over time we'll get more information on it, but we do believe, and I mentioned this before, and we do believe that the data, both from the clinical trials, but also the data now as we're getting it out in practice, is pointing to a stellar safety record for the vaccine. Not a perfect record, okay? I don't want to misrepresent here, but a stellar record. And in fact, if you have a severe disease, like let's say you have Parkinson's or severe asthma or one of these disorders that really affects your brain, and has other manifestations, having the vaccine actually keeps you out of the hospital and saves your life. And we've got a comment, we even heard a comment from Dr. Walensky yesterday, who's the head of the CDC on this. We've been saying this for a while. We had data, it's been lining up, and now the CDC has even gone out there and said, look, it turns out that deaths, people dying, and people going to the hospital, and oftentimes those things go together. And when people with severe disease go to the hospital with COVID-19, they're had a setup, and several of them, like in Parkinson's, which is not Tourette, by the way, but in Parkinson, some of our data suggests when people were unvaccinated or not vaccinated, 1 in 3 would not walk out of the hospital. And so the vaccine can save lives. And so it is important to keep that in mind. Again, this is not an advertisement for the vaccine. We're just here to bring you information, okay? And so you can make your own choices. Now, the Beverly Harris asks, any information regarding the vaccine and sudden increase of teen girls with Tourette-like syndrome after COVID infection? Yes, Beverly, we are looking at some of these cases that are coming in. We discussed this at our medical advisory board. We do not believe that these cases are the vaccine causing Tourette syndrome in groups of people. We've seen these outbreaks before. There was a famous one in Leroy, New York. And this is something where we have to communicate clearly with the public, because sometimes the social media and what you see on Facebook and what you hear sort of gets a little bit over the top. And so the teen girls with new onset Tourette syndrome from a COVID infection is not something that we believe is true. And so I want people to hear that message. But we do, as we've said before, Beverly, we do believe that in some folks with Tourette, not everyone, but some folks with Tourette that get the vaccine, they're going to get worse. Their symptoms are going to get worse. And we think that's due to stress, anxiety, sleep deprivation, having the procedure itself. Any procedure can worsen things, okay? So Terry Landa, thank you, Terry, for writing in to us. You have a very important question about Tourette and the autism spectrum and whether the vaccine is safe for folks who have tics or Tourette and are on the autism spectrum. The answer to that, Terry, is we believe yes, it is. And so the data we have so far suggests that people that are 12 and older that check all the boxes as qualified for that vaccine at this point, we believe the autism spectrum group is doing well with that, and we believe that this is a good option for them that can keep folks out of the hospital and potentially save lives. And so we have seen a good safety record to date, and remember, we share with you the data that we have to date. And so far so good, and we'll let you know if we see anything to the contrary. Okay. And Michelle Perez Imlay, thanks Michelle for writing in. We certainly appreciate your question about any effects on secondary conditions such as obsessive compulsive disorder. Well, Michelle, it turns out that COVID-19 itself, we're starting to see some data. I was reading a paper here this morning about this. You can see worsening of some of the symptoms like OCD just from getting COVID-19 infection itself. You can see worsening of any of the Tourette manifestations, OCD, which stands for obsessive compulsive disorder, or obsessive compulsive traits, the attention deficit disorder. You can see worsening of the motor or the vocal tics with COVID-19 itself. So this is infection. This isn't even talking about the vaccine. Infection itself. You can see worsening, and it's common to see worsening. And then we see a subset of people who the stress, anxiety, and other issues around the time that they get the vaccine, sometimes even before the needle goes in the arm, we see worsening of some of these conditions. So OCD, Michelle, would qualify within that group. So thanks for your question. Kim Mate writes in, what about kids? What about kids with Tourette getting the shot? Is that safe even at 12 years old? So Kim, I think we've mentioned a few times here, we're getting more and more data. I could not confidently answer your question, okay, about this. But I can tell you now, I couldn't confidently tell you at the beginning of the outbreak over a year ago, but now the data continues to accumulate. We have safety data from studies that it is relatively safe to get this in 12 years and old and up. Beverly, thank you for writing in and clarifying your question. Sometimes we misread things, so super apologies. I know less every day I practice medicine. So Beverly writes back, she didn't mean from the vaccine itself, those effects. She wanted to know, is it safe to give girls that have a sudden onset of tics after having a COVID infection the vaccine? Absolutely. Absolutely, Beverly. We do believe that is safe. Our medical advisory board just had a discussion about this group of folks. So yes, we do believe that it is safe. And following up on that, I have another question as to whether the new mRNA technology is safe and proven. And the answer to that is yes. It's absolutely stunning. It's so cool, when you see science come out and actually help people. But this idea of creating instructions for your immune system to be able to protect you against the COVID-19 virus, or to clear that virus using that technology, the mRNA technology, we do have lots of data now, thousands and thousands and thousands of persons with diseases, not just Tourette, showing that it is safe and is proven. And one of the reasons that we get so much data is because it's so important. We're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, and so many people are getting it. So I think it's rare that we actually see a situation where a new drug or a vaccine gets out there and we get this many data points. I just want to stress that to folks. We're not here to talk you into getting the vaccine or not. We're just here to give you information. But it is a rare thing in a pandemic. It's totally rare for us to be able to get a situation where we're in a pandemic and we can get so much data in so short of a time on safety. And so we do believe the mRNA technology is safe. This is the technology that's in the Pfizer and the Mrna shots. So the next question is how long does it take to be fully vaccinated? And the answer to that depends on which vaccine you get, whether the 1-shot or the 2-shot. But in general, if you have to paint with a broad brush, after you get your second shot, if it's a 2-shot vaccine, you want to be thinking 2-3 weeks, to be safe to think that you're fully vaccinated. It varies slightly depending on which vaccine you get, what part of the world you are, and the same with the single shot. So it's not immediate right after it goes into your arm. It does take a few weeks for those antibodies to form. It's going to take time for the immune system to key up against that and to make those antibodies and to be ready. The next question is will getting vaccinated help others and help end the pandemic? The answer to that question is yes. There's no question that the more people that get vaccinated and the faster we get them vaccinated, this is going to help to bring us closer to helping other people, which is the first part of the question, but also to bringing an end to the pandemic. And one thing that I want to stress to folks is that viruses, okay, viruses themselves, they like to mutate. Mutate is a fancy word that just means change. So they change their DNA, they change, and they do that to survive, okay? The longer we let the virus hang around, the more chance it has to mutate into different forms. The longer we let it hang around, the more chance it will mutate, okay? And right now, the vaccines are handling the mutations really well, okay? But if you let it hang around, we might get a mutation that the vaccine's not handling. So more people getting vaccinated, trying to bring this thing to a close before more mutations happen, super important. And we need to get vaccine all over the world, okay? We need to get vaccine all over the world because we've got to get this down and under control before these other mutations emerge. And so, yes, the answer is, will getting vaccines help to end quicker? Answer is yes. So we have a question here, a live question from Janice Gibson Bird. Janice, thank you for the question. Janice is 52 years old and has Tourette since she was 8. Her dad has dementia, and she wants to know, can the COVID shot make dementia worse possibly? We really worried about this, Janice, and in my own practice, for those of you that know me, I also see lots of people with degenerative diseases, movement disorders, Parkinson, Alzheimer's, all sorts of different dementia syndromes. I'm a neurologist by training, and so I'll give you that by disclosure. And we worried about it, but actually it seems to be the reverse. Our folks who have dementia are tolerating the shot really well, and it's saving lives and not making the dementia worse in these folks. And so thanks, Janice, for that question. And as we get more data, we'll share that data, as it becomes available. The question that comes up now is whether the vaccines will help to protect us against the new variants we hear about in the news, like the Delta variant in particular. The answer to that question is yes, they will, particularly the 2 vaccines, the mRNA vaccines. We're getting data to show they perform really well against that variant. So far, so good. But again, if you let a virus hang around, it might mutate into a form that's not covered, okay, by the vaccines. And when you see this hanging around, that may mean that we'll need yearly boosters, okay, to keep this under control until we have the pandemic under control. So this may go on for a while, okay? And second, these boosters may have to account for some of these new variants. And so super important, and I'm very privileged to be able to give you the information that we have on this, but also super scared inside about the variants coming forward. And so you might see, as the variants emerge too, as we get to the next versions of the vaccine, as we're going to need to have booster shots, you might see some of these vaccines slightly different. So we'll keep an eye on that and let you know, but they may need to react. And when you see the influenza shots and the flu shots, and you get your flu shot every year, that what happens is you have different variants, and the CDC tries to choose the right variants to put into the flu shot each year. And so we may see some of that here as we move down the road, but so far so good. We seem to be covering well, so if you get the vaccine, it still seems to be good against these new variants, especially in keeping people out of the hospital. So thank you for the question. We have an anonymous question here online, and so we super appreciate that. And so thanks for sending in all of your questions, and we're totally happy to try to answer as many questions as you have today. And again, if we don't get to your question, make sure you put it up in the chat, and we'll have Megan Burns go through and make sure that we get you an answer, if not in real time, but as soon as we can. And of course, please take advantage. We have a number of different resources. So our social handles: Facebook at Tourette Association, Instagram at Tourette Association, Twitter at Tourette ASSN, and then of course you can email us at support@tourette.org. or our website, Tourette.org, or our 1-800 number if you're old school like me, 888-4-TOURET. And so if you Google Tourette Association of America, you'll see that. Again, for those of you that are just tuning in, I'm Michael Okun. I'm a neurologist at the University of Florida, and my Twitter handle, if you want to start a discussion, is @Michael Okun. It's pretty easy to get a hold of me. And so thanks, and keep writing in with these questions. These are terrific. So the next question is do we know how many children with Tourette syndrome have received the vaccine as of today? How many adverse reactions? How many side effects? How much increase in tics? And how confident are we that the benefits outweigh the risks? We don't have that information yet, so I'm going to be completely honest with you. We don't have a number, a tally that's coming out in real time. But what we are doing is we're beginning to do what are called epidemiologic studies. And so what that means is we're starting to look back, at these different diseases, and Tourette being one of them, and we'll be able to get those numbers, but we can't get those numbers in real time. And so we're beginning to see studies that are grabbing that information out of these large medical records and medical databases, but we haven't seen any uptick, no pun intended, in tics, long-term issues. And we're feeling confident in the Medical Advisory Board for the Tourette Association of America that the benefits far outweigh the potential risks. And so thanks for that question. It's great. Josh Lambright writes to us here live. Thank you, Josh, for the question. Has a pretty intense case of Tourette, strong responses to the flu vaccine that can knock him out for a day or more. So, boy, Josh is worried. How long does he need to be off of work with the immune response and expected for people like me? Josh, we advise in folks who have had some issue with the influenza vaccine to make sure that you either take a day off from work or get the vaccine on a Friday so that you have the weekend to recover. Most people, even with the severe influenza reactions to vaccines, are going to get better within 24 to 48 hours. So just trying to time it, I think, is important. So if you did it on a Friday afternoon, then you'd have half a day plus the 2 days on the weekend if you wanted to be completely safe. So thanks for the question, Josh. But planning, I think, is important. There's a question from Franca Marsh. Thanks, Franca, for writing in about her 12-year-old son taking clonidine to mitigate tics. Any concerns for vaccine diminishing or canceling the effects of the meds? So far, our medical advisory board does not feel that there are any concerns, Franca, for it canceling out the effects of any of the drugs. If that changes, we'll let you know. We'll post something right away on the website. But we have a lot of experience now, and we're not seeing that. And so we definitely will keep you posted. How long it comes. If anything changes, we're going to put that up and give it to you right away. But right now, haven't seen that. Catherine Duvall, thank you, Catherine, for writing in. Wants to know how long would you expect the vaccine to take effect? And is it going to be a week? Is it going to be a month? And if they get tics, when are they going to come? When are they going to go? So Catherine, this is a tricky question to answer. The part we know the answer to is the vaccine, the effect of the vaccine is going to take a few weeks to get to its full effect. So let's say 3 weeks or so. And it depends on which vaccine that you get. So they're going to be slightly different in the number of days. But, people think 2, 3, 4 weeks for sure. And then if the tics come up, usually as the vaccine, begins to cool off in the system, the tics will come down. Now, what we do in Parkinson's disease and in Tourette in our practice, we see both of those different types of persons with diseases, and so you might find that interesting. But they're both diseases of similar circuits in the brain, and sometimes any surgery or any stress, sleep deprivation, school for our kids that are enrolled in college and taking examinations can worsen, and even just the stress around this can worsen. And sometimes we do need to adjust their medicines. And so if things are not going well and the tics are up, sometimes your doc can make an adjustment, and that can be super helpful for you. And so don't rule that out, Catherine, as something, particularly if you're continuing to suffer. Corrine Kirkhoven writes in about the Janssen vaccine and anything known about effects with Tourette. So far, so good, Corrine. So we got our fingers crossed. The Janssen vaccine, just like the Mrna, Janssen is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and they're in partnership with that one. But just like the Mrna vaccine and just like the Pfizer vaccine, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, they all seem to be doing well. Knock on wood, we don't think there's any issue with Tourette syndrome and those vaccines. And so super good question. So thanks, Corrine, for bringing that up. For those people that may not know, the Janssen vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson and Janssen, that vaccine is a single dose. Okay, it's a single dose vaccine. The others are 2 dosages. The next question is, we have a 12-year-old daughter who received the first dose. I want to know if there's any data around positives or pending questions for the second dose around females who are developing hormones and increase of tics because of that. Super question. Thank you for asking that question. We don't have a lot of information about that right now, and so if we get anything, we'll post it up on our website. But I can tell you that that again, if you are getting the vaccine around the time that you're having menses, then this can worsen. This can, exacerbate the effects. And so when we look at a 12-year-old, we also have to look if they do have any hormonal abnormalities or any endocrine abnormalities, or they have particular times during the month that you have a prediction where you think they're going to be doing a little worse. Try to avoid those times when you give them the vaccine. It's not unsafe to give it to them, but you might get less issues afterwards. So great question, and I think timing is everything in life, right? And so having great timing, I think, is really important. Here's a question about antibodies, and this question says, both myself and my husband tested positive for antibodies. The lab report reads exactly the same. One of us had known COVID, and one of us had the vaccine, and I have Tourette. What would be the reasoning to risk an adverse event of a vaccine if it has no benefit? So, great question. First of all, when you get your antibodies measured, it really depends on what lab's doing the antibodies. And remember, we're doing this in real time, so not all antibody tests are equal. They have to be validated, and we don't know exactly what they mean, okay? And so a positive antibody test, likely means there's some COVID antibodies in your system. That's good. A negative test doesn't necessarily mean it's not there, and it doesn't tell you necessarily about protection. We've also seen folks, and I know a doctor who actually got COVID-19 and immediately got antibodies tested and didn't have antibodies after having had COVID-19 and went on to get the vaccine. And so we're not actually sure how to interpret all of the antibody testing, whether they're all equal, whether some of them are going to end up being thrown out as not being valid tests. But we do know that even if you've had COVID, and we know this through the CDC, who's taken a really deep look at this with the data, if you've had COVID-19, before, you will probably get some protection, but it is recommended that, a month or 2 or 6 weeks after, that you go ahead and proceed to get vaccinated, because you can get COVID again, and it's not an absolute that because you've had COVID that you're going to get that protection. And we've been around now long enough to know that. And so the recommendation is to still get the vaccine. And the vaccine will have benefit in people who have been affected with COVID before. And we believe there's a short and long-term benefit to this approach. And so that's the CDC. So don't shoot me as the messenger of that data. So if you've had COVID-19, it doesn't take you off the hook. The world's best scientists are still thinking that it's useful to get this, and there's data now to support that. Darius Ganat says there's no information available about long-term effects of these vaccines for anyone. So Darius, good point. It depends on how you evaluate the term, how you define the term long-term. We do have people who have been in studies now for over a year. And so that's starting to get long-term. When we look at studies, and I've published a fair number of studies out of my laboratory, And when we look in medicine, 6 months is an excellent follow-up point. We have a ton of data, Darius, at 6 months. And if you get 1 year data on people, we don't have as much at 1 year, but we're approaching getting even more, particularly for the tens of thousands of people who were in the studies and now are getting it. So we are beginning to accumulate long-term data on the vaccines. And so I just mentioned that. Again, this is not an advertisement for the vaccine. Everybody should get the data, get the information, make your own choice. We shouldn't be pressuring people to make choices, and we should respect each other no matter what we decide, and we should share the information as we get it. So I think, Darius, I'm glad that you bring that up and how we define long-term. Most of us in the medical field and in my lab, we define it when we do clinical outcomes research. We define it at 6 and 12 months as sort of the longer-term numbers that we look. Of course, it'd be great to have 24 and 36-month data, but a lot of our therapies, Darius, it might surprise you, we don't have published 24 and 36-month data that comes out on any of these therapies, many of which we use in clinical practice, and so we don't always get as much long-term information past that term. But we're starting to see more at that 12-month level. So I think it's important. We have some questions that are coming in that are kind of confidential questions, and if you have a question that you think is confidential and you don't want it discussed here, publicly, please feel free to email us at the word support at Tourette.org, and we'll get your question answered. We've got a great medical advisory board, and we're happy to help in any way that we can. So the next question is about needing additional boosters. And, so this gets back at this discussion that we were having before, and this idea that, if this coronavirus, COVID-19, hangs around, keeps mutating, and stays in other countries around the world and in many countries, then we are going to need boosters, and we're going to need to have this as sort of the same sort of situation that has unfolded for other infections, influenza being the most common one that we talk about. And so it's important to keep your eyes on this, but I think the conventional sciences, we're all counting on boosters. So if you're like me and you need to psychologically prepare for things before they happen, I would go ahead and psychologically prepare yourself for a world where we're going to see some booster shots here at least every year. That would be my guess. That's speculation, but let's see how things shape up, and we'll keep you updated on the Tourette website. Next question, there's been some indications of COVID-19 causing prolonged inflammatory responses, potentially triggering autoimmune diseases. Obviously, we need more research to look at this. And the question is, how concerned should we be in terms of the vaccine aggravating Tourette syndrome or other unusual side effects and triggering autoimmune responses? We were super concerned, and so thank you for this question. I personally, as a physician, and as someone who sees a lot of folks and tries to take care of people, we've been really concerned about this, the triggering of inflammatory components. On the whole, statistically, we just haven't seen a lot of this. And then some of the cases that we're seeing, it's hard to put them together, because they're one-offs. It's a case here, and we have, hundreds of thousands of people that are getting the vaccine, and is it related, or were they going to get that anyway? How common is it? And so we do know that what we see is very rare, and what we don't know at this point is, are these single case reports people that were going to get sick anyway? So there are people that are going to get strokes anyway. There are people who are going to get inflammatory muscle diseases anyway. There are people who are going to get lupus anyway. And are we either triggering something they're going to get anyway? Are they just getting it as the natural course, as you would expect statistically in a population? Or is the vaccine in some way, in very rare cases, setting it off? And we don't have the answers to those questions yet, so I don't want to act like an expert and get over my skis and tumble down the mountain. So as we get more information, we'll let you know. But so far, the safety data has been way better than I think anybody expected. I think, frankly, we expected worse of a safety record for something that has been so effective against COVID-19, and so we're pretty we're pretty excited about that. How do you weigh risks and benefits, for a vaccine? Honestly, I like to sit down with people and have a chat and not rush them out of the room. And also just tell people, look, I respect your point of view and I'm going to respect you even if you decide you don't want to have the shot. If you want the information that I have, I'm happy to give it to you or look up information on questions if I don't know the answer. And I'm here to help. And I think that should be the approach of all medical professionals here. I don't think we should be preaching at people. I think we should be sharing data, having a discussion, really respecting each other's points of view and, letting people who are concerned about safety and other issues, letting them make up their own mind as they look at the data and have a conversation and have a real dialogue and understand back and forth how people are thinking and why people are thinking in certain ways. And so we talk about that. Whatever we're doing, any procedure, whether it's a vaccine or a surgery or a medical procedure, we always weigh risks and benefits. And so the question was about risks and benefits, and we certainly want to discuss risks and benefits in the context of, what is it overall? And overall, the benefits way outweigh the risks. And so that would be the main message. And the message, I hope is loud and clear that if we were doing statistics on it, it would be overwhelming that the benefits outweigh the risks. But that doesn't negate the concerns that some people have, and I think we need to talk through those concerns, and we need to respect people when they have different concerns or different points of view. So the next question is how can one prepare extra caregivers and particularly parents and others if there's a reaction and maybe you've got somebody who's working in the house and you can't fully take care of them. And so this gets back to another comment from another great question that we had today, and that's planning. And I think the safest thing to do is to say, give yourself, when you're gonna let them have the shot, make sure you have 2 days. So if you give them the shot on one day, ideally if you give it on a Friday, if you're worried, that you're not going to be able to care for them if they get worse, if you give them 48 hours, most people are going to completely resolve or get back to close to a baseline within 48 hours. That's a general good rule, of thumb. And so trying to plan it rather than go in without planning is important. I love the question because I think that folks that plan are going to be more successful, and they're thinking, well, it probably won't happen, but if it does, we're going to be in a position to really fully take care of the person. So, and finally, the last question here that we have that's come in is a question regarding hearing about family and friends who've had increased tick frequencies about getting vaccinated, and could this be creating inflammation, and could this inflammation be affecting different, what we call in the brain, signal transduction pathways. This is from somebody who's has a science background and tells me they have a science background, and they're worried about the creation of inflammation with the shots. So excellent question. I think it's awesome that you're thinking at this level. I think about it a little differently. The shots do create inflammation. That's what they should do. And if they're not doing that, then we worry. And so we actually want to have some inflammation, and we want, things to kind of react. We want people's immune systems to recognize the vaccine, to take those instructions, to make the surface antigen that's on the surface, that spike protein people talk about on the news all the time, and that causes inflammation, because inflammation is really when the immune system is geared up. And so that's what we want to see. So that's positive. What we don't want to see, as another questioner wrote, is a concern that the vaccine rarely is going to cause some huge inflammatory disease, or it's going to aggravate somebody that has an inflammatory disease and make things worse. We just haven't seen that all in all, but there are singular cases, of this, and we just don't know without putting those cases together. We don't know what those cases mean. We don't know if those people were going to get those disorders anyway. People who are going to have strokes, and sometimes they'll get them in the time sequence that they're getting the vaccine, but the two have nothing to do with each other, or if they have something to do with each other. And the key here is, and I want you to pay attention to this point because it's super important. It took me a while to understand this, even as a scientist in the field. We have to get enough data so we don't speculate. At the beginning of the pandemic, we speculated that ibuprofen was causing all these people to die and was worsening, and it turns out that it actually probably was the opposite. It was helping people and not hurting people. And so we speculated based on a few of the cases that we saw, and it ended up not being true. And so back to this inflammation creating issues, this is something that we do need to look at. This is not something that we need to blow off, okay? But we need to look at it carefully. We're not seeing a lot of these cases, and we have to decide whether these are related or not. And we look at these large data sets. So getting back to Darius Ganat's question, Darius, thank you for that great question. Getting back to that concern about having these long-term data sets, as we move in here in the next few months, we get to having a lot of one-year data on folks. Then we'll be able to start to use that data to answer these questions, and we won't be speculating on Facebook Live, as to what the answers are. But so far, it looks fairly rare. So we have made it through the questions that were sent in and the questions that are in the chat. We're sitting right at an hour. I want to remind you that this event was brought to you by the Tourette Association of America, one of the planet's very best and greatest resources for everything to do with Tourette, for family members, for caregivers, for care partners. I want to remind you they have social media handles: Facebook at Tourette Association, Instagram at Tourette Association, on Twitter at the word Tourette, ASSN. I have a Twitter handle called at Michael Okun if you want to tweet me or follow any of the information that we post, either on my handle, but even more so on the Tourette handle. Please feel free to do so. We also have an email. There were a few questions that were confidential, and so we have an email that's support@tourette.org, and our website, tourette.org. And of course, if you're old school like me, you can dial 888-4-TOURET, 888-4-TOURET, and a plethora of resources online. If you go to Google and you type in Tourette Association of America, we have COVID-19 resources. You can search on the site for those. And we have also surveyed our community to find out what the impact has been and how folks with Tourette have been impacted, by this terrible virus. So thank you for spending the hour with me. It's been, just a very, very, awesome day for us to be together. And we certainly look forward to, and we are very much welcoming all the questions, and thank everybody from all over the planet that sent us questions before the event and live during the event. We will post this video, and if we can be of any help, please contact the Tourette Association of America. So coming to you from the Norman Fixell Institute at the University of Florida, on behalf of the Tourette Association of America, thank you for spending the hour with us. Everyone, be safe.